Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm a registered massage therapist in BC. Today, I'm going to be going over the couch stretch with you. So called because it's easiest done in front of a couch. You can also do this one in front of a wall, but you need to make sure you have some really good ankle mobility, which I'll explain later. This stretch is for your hip flexors, primarily your iliacus and your psoas major, which are frequently referred to as your iliopsoas. It also gets your rectus femoris and your sartorious. Because these are our hip flexors, we need to bring the hip joint into extension to achieve this stretch, which means bringing your knee behind your hip joint, which is most easily achieved if you know how to do a posterior pelvic tilt. If you're not sure what that means, or if you struggle with doing a posterior pelvic tilt, you can pop over and watch my previous video on pelvic tilts. For this stretch, you're going to want to make sure that you have something soft under your knees. I'm using a yoga mat here, but you can also use a folded up hand towel or a throw cushion from your couch. For this stretch, we want to start out by coming onto our hands and knees, bringing our feet to the front of the couch. We can then bring the knee on the side we're stretching to the front of the couch. This brings our shin or our tibia resting against the front of the couch, and you'll notice that the top of my foot is resting on the seat of the couch. If you're doing this against the wall, this is going to mean that your toes are going to have to point straight up to the ceiling, which requires some pretty good ankle mobility. At this point, we want to come into that posterior pelvic tilt, and some of you may start feeling a stretch. If that's you, hang out here. For the rest of us, we want to start working our knee forwards, our opposite knee, so the right knee forwards away from the couch. As you do this, it's easy to come into an anterior pelvic tilt. Make sure that you keep that pelvis tilted posteriorly, keeping that tailbone scooped under, bringing your hip down towards the floor. Most of you will experience an adequate stretch through this range. If you have not yet started feeling a stretch, you can then bring your opposite foot, so your right foot, towards the ground, making sure that your ankle is stacked under your knee. Then make sure that you're into a posterior pelvic tilt and slowly start to straighten yourself up. Once you have found a point that is an appropriate stretch for yourself, you can hold it as a static stretch, or you can make it a dynamic stretch by going through an anterior and a posterior pelvic tilt. This is a stretch that's really easy to overdo, so when you're going in and out of this stretch, make sure that you stop before you experience any pain. Mild discomfort is okay, but stretching should never be painful. If you have any questions about this or any other self-care tips, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to respond.